Hey everyone, this is Dan, talking today about the micro level of business. So I actually started in the middle of the story with the last video, which was why companies kind of think like companies think. Now we want to talk about the actual ways they make money. So last time it was sort of mezzo and it was about market spaces and equilibria. So I really wanted to get at the idea that there were actually a number of distinct social media markets. So we have 4 or 5 first level models to think about. I tend to combine freemium and subscription in the same model. Affiliate models, virtual goods, and advertising. It is possible to think of affiliates as a subset of advertising. And virtual goods is a subset of freemium, but honestly it is better to space them out for your thinking and strategy. Freemiums and subscriptions. Now, these are 2 very tightly related models. The eventual goal of both is to receive a monthly or quarterly or annual chunk of money from your users, ideally before they use your service. Now, the idea is that you get regular revenue. And what you're trying to do is provide in a freemium a basic tier of service that is enough to get people in and then to monetize them in some way, typically with advertising. And then one of the easiest freemium sort of trade-off models is to say, hey, we'll take out the advertising if you agree just to pay us, because isn't it more efficient? There are other services that then give additional or superior access. So you start thinking about Tinder as an example, and you notice you get more talk, you get more buttons, you get more stickers, whatever else. Now, this is really ideal as a freemium when you really need strong network effects. And this is a dual product argument, meaning if you're, say, a dating service, you need to get a whole bunch of pictures for people to look at, right? You're not going to have a worthwhile Tinder until you've got a lot of people swiping. And so that's the very first layer of this, is you've got to get a lot of people in the door. And so you got to have that free tier, but there has to be enough of a reason to use that next tier so people do it. And I would say, going back to the first video, the distinction between the free and subscription tiers must be closely aligned with the social logic of the product, right? And what do I mean by that? Because that just sounds like social theory nonsense to you. What that means is the reason why someone pays more has to be tied into the game of the platform. It's got to be important to why you were there in the first place. Eventually, if the product is really good and the network is there, you can go on ahead and switch to a pure subscription model. People are seeing this with Netflix, where their sharing of accounts functionally was a freemium, where then you'd simply share it around. And now they're increasingly converting people over to regular paid accounts, and they're pulling it back on partners, selling reduced price Netflix access. So that's really the end goal, is that you have everyone paying a subscription, although there are some services that will never be there. This is a great example of two-sided market theory. In a freemium, then, you have one pool of demand that is looking for the free product and one that is looking for the paid version. The question then becomes how you set the price. The counterexample, and I describe all this in my book, to Tinder is actually eHarmony. So what if when you set the equilibrium price, you set it higher than 0? So in true freemium, you say that we will give away the base product in order to drive network effects. It is also possible that you might say that you will never give away the base product. In which case you might say, give me a nominal fee, and then we will have an additional fee for the enhanced version. This then would substantially limit the total reach of the platform, but it could dramatically change the social logic of the experience. So if you want to do dating without having to wade through hookups, then you go to eHarmony rather than Tinder. Does this make sense to you? So the places where you set those 2 key price floors, which is it a true freemium? Is the initial tier 0 or is it greater than 0? And then where you set that boundary between tier 1 and tier 2, and who knows, tier 3, tier 4, tier N, is really difficult. And honestly, I don't think there's a good way to set it that doesn't refer immediately back to the reasons why people were there in the first place. After that, you can raise and lower the price. I would say you bring up the price slowly until you find the equilibrium. I would not do this like an auction where you go high and then bring it down because you really can't risk damaging your network. Affiliate models, we'll make a size-based delineation here. There are small affiliate models and big affiliate models, many of which take place on Instagram. So the small affiliate model is when you have an established persona that then has something like a referral code. So my example in class is an Instagram model trying to sell you leggings or protein powder, right? And so if people are into that person, they have the parasocial relationship, they use the code, the person gets a little something something. You could even try to slide gifts of product to the person in here as well. But in a true affiliate model, it depends on making the sale. That model was supposed to be a big deal a few years ago. There was a theory that we'd end up with affiliate exchanges, similar to advertising exchanges, where people would just go back and forth trading affiliate links to each other. That really hasn't materialized. Now, the big affiliate model is catalog retailing. So if you're on Instagram or Pinterest and you have the ability to put in a buy button where then you get some affiliate credit when the transaction is complete, that is a beautiful and highly compressed business that you should want to be a part of. So you have your Pinterest, you have the buy button, and then they can just skim along on all these transactions by providing this great service. So it's dual product in as much as they are giving the Pinterest product to you and then your attention is being sold to someone else. But they don't have to deal with any of the nonsense of a two-sided market where you have different people going in different ways. Now, you could also see this two-sided market in a different way, but we'll talk about that next week. For smaller players, if you go with a true affiliate model, it can really damage your credibility because you're just seen as selling a bunch of junk. And it can be really hard to find a good partner, someone who pays you on time, someone who doesn't dispute your clicks. On the catalog level, it can be a two-sided market. Like, people want there to be a lot of users on the platform, and they want there to be a lot of vendors when they start facilitating transactions. People don't want to be locked into a market where they're funneled to a monopoly. So then that's why Pinterest would never want to actually be the retailer itself. They would just want to be the transaction facilitator in this sense, getting those affiliate credits. It could also be seen as a highly specialized advertising model that instead of seeing the affiliate link as users passing along a referral to you, you could see buying the referrals as buying a specialized kind of advertising. It just really depends on your perspective. I tend to come from the influencer's perspective. And so I see affiliate models as a way for me to make a referral and thus get money back. If you come from the retailer's perspective, you are buying an advertisement with that affiliate. Virtual goods were 12 years ago on Facebook were a huge deal. Who are you going to buy a badge for Valentine's Day, etc.? DLCs and in-game playables are different. They actually have some utility, and they're directly aligned with the social logic of the game. Let me say that again. In-game playables are directly aligned with the social logic of the game. They make sense, and that market is viable. Other kinds of virtual goods have just totally fizzled. The issue is with whales. That's a term from the gambling industry, meaning a high roller who's going to come in and lose a bunch of money. They are what make the industry work. Professional poker players don't make the industry work. People who are decent at blackjack don't make the industry work. If anything, you may lose money on those people and those tables. It is a handful of actual operations where you truly make money. Virtual goods can only happen in a highly established ecosystem, and the more of these ecosystems that are out there, unless you can really concentrate the whales, this is not a viable model. It's just going to be a toss-in for you. Like, maybe you can toss in a virtual good from time to time that could justify some kind of payment. Maybe your virtual good could be a form of advertising for a third party, something like that. But this idea that we were going to get these huge streams of money either from gambling on virtual goods or on just selling the virtual goods themselves just never panned out for the obvious reasons. The social logic of most virtual goods is just not there to support any meaningful price level. Now we talk about advertising. And I want to make a distinction here. There is the big sort of legacy world of online advertising where you call an account executive and you buy the background on an app or a website. That's typically either unmeasured or measured by impressions. And you're just saying, if you're Dr. Pepper, you're saying you want the background of ESPN.com for Super Bowl weekend for 4 days, right? You want it Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. You'll pay a few $1 million for that. And ESPN will have some numbers of how many people generally click through. You make the deal, actually look at it, you make the deal, and there you go. Right? These are about the big sort of games, the big buys. These are very lucrative for everyone involved. Typically, though, you're not, unless you're working on the sort of Fortune 500 side, you're not going to be making these buys with a social network. you're going to be working in a world of exchanges. And these typically are small accounts, either people buying a handful of ads or selling a handful of ads, and they're facilitated by people who are not proximate, so there are no account executives. I have a 7-layer sort of model of this in my book, where you see that at each stage the transactions get further disintermediated between the potential purchaser of advertising and the person who's actually engaged in the market. These are priced in cost per click, because people don't want to pay for a bunch of impressions on a website that no one is actually looking at. There are huge issues with fraud here, and knowing who is actually selling who to what, especially when you get into the world of deep retargeting and ad networks selling to each other at different kinds of peering. You might be just throwing money at something expecting to get one viewer and you don't get them at all. The most valuable clicks here are the retargeted clicks, and this is caused by a theory of the funnel, which is used in the industry, which assumes a relatively linear model of the sales experience where someone has no desire to buy something. They see a series of advertisements, and by the last advertisement, they have been converted to make their purchase. This is a very strong and very linear theory of media effects that doesn't really play out in reality. The funnel is very useful, though, for explaining why you should buy ads in the first place and allocating credit to those people who make that last retargeted click. Although, who isn't to say that the first click that got them going down the path or the first impression was not actually the most important? We may be rewarding all the wrong people here. So with advertising, it can be really easy, right? You can just say, plug in to a Google appliance, have Google put ads in your page. If you can get the attention there and focus on it, you can make some money. At the same time, the thresholds for accessing that kind of funding are rising all the time. You look at YouTube channels, typically now you need 10,000 views even to get into the world of monetization, because they don't want to be dealing with trying to facilitate transactions for a cent or a fraction of a cent across a bunch of videos. What would any self-respecting ad executive on, say, the buyer side say, like, oh, so I'm going to pay YouTube $10,000 for a smattering of 1 or 2 impressions across a whole bunch of videos that we didn't even want our content by? So this era was really hot. There were all kinds of secondary dimensions of it with trading desks and other things. But in general, it's falling apart because it wasn't very good. And I think that is something to think about. Which is advertising is useful. It definitely contributes to the economy and to moving ideas around, and it's important, but it's not nearly as linear as people in the online space would have you think. At this point, students ask me about Patreon and GoFundMe. Donations are a separate and different problem. You think about Gab, the anti-Semitic social network, they can't actually have a business because their content is horrible. And in this sense, then, they rely entirely on donations to keep their system going. Now, examples that are good are different sorts of accounts on YouTube or Twitch, where people are able to pay in and see their favorite streamer or see someone make incredible content like ContraPoints. And so when you think about donations in that sense, it is a very uneven market. The research on Kickstarter has been pretty clear that it's a rich-get-richer system. And it is unclear that a social network or any sort of industrial or scalable appliance could subsist on donations alone. At the same time, though, some things do, like churches, right? So this is not to say that donations are entirely out of the question, but in this era, we have yet to really see a great one of these devised entirely on donations. What are we going to talk about next time? In the next video, we're going to talk about compression, which connects the sort of meso-corporate behaviors and the microtransactions to the idea of scale, and especially IPO logic. So we're going to talk a lot about the Snapchat IPO and really look at some other ideas like the Valley of Death and think about how these multipliers are going to fall apart. So instead of saying, oh, look, an ad on Facebook is going to be worth infinitely more than a bus ad forever, there is a real chance that we could see a return to rationality in these markets and that these stocks will not be overvalued for the infinite future.